Welcome to Truth Stream. We are back once again with Leo Zagami. He's just released his new book, and it is Confessions of an Illuminati, Volume 9. And it's just to read the top part of it's on his website, which is great. 7 Steps to the Secrets of the New World Disorder, from Transhumanism and Immortality to Gnostic Jesus, UFOs, and Insect Witchcraft. And I do want to read the title of the title of the last chapter, because it's optimistic, and it is How to Survive Cyber Satan and His Alien Invasion Without Fear. So I'm already excited about this. So Scott,
always intrigued.
Where do we want to kick? Go ahead, Scott.
Well, we had a little bit of a conversation prior to recording, and I think a good place to start might be the origin story of the Sabbatean Frank tradition and how it pertains to Ukraine as well.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. And as you know, this is volume 9 of my Confessions, my latest creation. And in this book, I have devised a way whereby, even if you haven't read my previous books, which of course, it's not easy for everybody to buy another 8 books together with this one. So if they think that it's an obligation to get also the other, no, absolutely. It lives in a dimension of its own. Talking about, of course, Ukraine, first of all, Madame Blavatsky was born in modern-day Dnipro in Ukraine. So Madame Blavatsky is the founder of the Theosophical Society. At the same time, she was the disciple of somebody else who had created this Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor called Max Theon. Max Theon himself was a Sabbatean, was a Polish Jew, and so all these connections bring us back to a guy, of course, called Jacob Frank, which some of your viewers may maybe already know all about, but it's important to explain that Jacob Frank thought of himself as the reincarnation of Sabbatai Zevi. Reincarnation is something that parts of Judaism believe in, or at least used to. These days, a bit less. But in any case, what happened is that there was this enormous influence in the very foundation of the Theosophical Society, which was established after the death of Eliphas Levi, who was also an important contributor, inspiration for these people. But at the same time, like I said, the Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor is really surrounded in mystery. There is not really many books that talk about it, but it was present also during the height of the Spiritism phenomena. And, the phenomena that was born out of the Fox sisters in the 1850s was a little bit like the UFO phenomenon. It changed forever, even the course of history to a certain extent, because there were even presidents that brought sciences in the White House, and the whole thing was getting really bit out of control. And these entities that, in a way, you are inviting in with this channeling, they're not really at times, most of the times, anything to do with your dead ancestors or some other historical character. Most of the time, they're demons and entities that in some way want to enter and manipulate our reality. Now, Madame Blavatsky was also a very gifted spiritist medium, and she claimed to have channeled all kinds of books that became, though, the ground foundation of not only the Theosophical Society teachings, but later on also the Arianism and basically the basis of all that milieu that gave birth to Nazism. In fact, they were also the one to promote the swastika for the first time here in the West. So Madame Blavatsky was born in Ukraine. However, if we ask Madame Blavatsky if she was Russian or Ukrainian, she probably would have told us Russian, because still, at the time of Madame Blavatsky, the Ukrainian identity was not really well defined. And in my new book, I try to explain how a number of secret societies were actually involved with the creation of the Ukrainian identity. Aside from that, going back to the Sabbatean Frankist, because it's definitely a very interesting subject. There was a lodge that was based in Prague that was particularly influential, and they was practicing also this very elusive rite known as the Sat Bahai rite, connected to a gentleman known as John Yarker. And these people, they were known as the Asiatic Brethren. They were part of an order that was also connected to the Sabbatean Frankists through the cousin of Jacob Frank, a guy called Franz Thomas Schoenfeld. And this guy is basically inspired the birth of the Bohemian Club. So in the end, on this side of the world, because you see there is a number of clubs spread around the world known as the Schalarafia. They are known as more like social clubs. They dress up. They're German. You have to be German. Nobody really investigated this quasi-Masonic society that likes to meet in castles. Otherwise, I think they should be shut down tomorrow morning, because they are completely linked with the rise of Nazism, left, right, and center. And also, even one of the guys who was inspiration in the construction, in the, let's say, remodeling and recrafting of the Wewelsburg castle of the SS. So, I mean, but the Schalarafia secret society arrived basically in San Francisco in the same period. They were inspirational to this Bohemian Club that then, of course, as we know, started to meet up at this place that we know now as the Bohemian Grove. But at the beginning, the club was kind of launching itself as artists meeting artists. And then the guys with the big bucks came in, and then they purchased the land. And of course, it became that elitarian stronghold. But it was still very much connected to the Nazis. In fact, after the Second World War, in the 60s, I don't remember exactly which American president had to get, he actually got quite angry, because there was this former Nazi, I think he was going around with a jeep parading the symbols of the Nazi, of Roma's Africa campaign and stuff. And so at one point, I think Gerald Ford, yes, he got angry and said, you know, to this Groove employee, because he was working there. This former Nazi was working, doing all the errands at the Bohemian Club, at the Bohemian Grove, sorry. And so he said, take off that Nazi symbol, you know, take off the Nazi symbol. We can't have it here. It's a bit too much. So there is a direct connection with the Illuminati, also because the Schalarafia symbol is the symbol of the Illuminati, basically. Schalarafia is the owl symbol, once again, that we find parading in these clubs. So as you can see, it's linked completely to both the Bohemian Club, but also the Schalarafia were, of course, German and inspired directly from the Illuminati. So this, I guess, to these kind of things you can find in my new book, because they are connected also to this guy, John Yarker, who is amongst the three people which I discuss, analyze, whose teachings about Jesus in the lodges of Freemasonry and the Illuminati I expose as fraudulent, heretical, and even dangerous, of course. One of them is Adam Weishaupt, the other one is Albert Pike, a great reformer of the ancient accepted scholarship, and then, of course, John Yarker, who is a minor figure, seems, but in reality is an equally big figure as Albert Pike, because he was in charge of the ancient and primitive rite, the Memphis and Mizraim, the Egyptian rites that gave birth after to the OTO, and then he was the guy who sold this 33rd degree to Aleister Crowley. Like I explained, I actually show also the documents in my new book. And so I explain how these teachings that come from what is known as the various Gnostic schools, Gnostic Christianity, though Gnosticism is said to actually have started even before Christianity, probably at the time in ancient Sumeria, and in Babylon already we have traces of Gnosticism. However, their interpretation of Jesus as time is partisan, is fictional, is putting in the mouth of Jesus words that are instead from some of their own teachers that they were trying to push And they were also very much initiatic in their way. They were for the knowledge of the elite, not for the knowledge, setting free, or it wasn't something. The Gnostics have never been about embracing large numbers of peoples. Maybe the only ones who do have a resemblance of Gnosticism who do that, they are the Mandeans. The Mandeans who exist still today, who have this particularity of believing more into St. John the Baptist than in Jesus. For them, the last great prophet is St. John the Baptist. And they still exist in the Middle East, even if they were, of course, exterminated in Iraq and stuff. I mean, they have problems, of course, being in those areas. But the Gnostics, the word, as you know, is knowledge. It's about searching for knowledge. And everybody these days views the Gnostics positively within, especially the New Age realm. And why is that? Because since the 70s, Freemasonry and the Illuminati start pushing this idea that Gnosticism was, were simply teachings of Christianity that haven't been accepted. Now, of course, there might be teachings of Jesus that might have been lost in the vaults of the Vatican archives, and that's for sure. There might be things that we don't know. Having said that, the Gnostic teachings never really bring anything new to the table that is completely groundbreaking, if not for those initiates that started this gnosis and end up then imagining themselves as gods. But also there is this great heresy about God being evil. So this is another thing, God is evil for the Gnostics. And he basically has an oppression model for humanity, which he exercised through the archons, who are these these demons, basically. And so when it comes down to Gnosticism, it's a little bit difficult to say that, we can embrace it just like another form of Christianity. Actually, it's not possible to do so. But in the lodges of the Illuminati, with Adam Weishaupt started to push the acceptance of Gnosticism, also because some of the first Gnostic communities gave also that communistic socialist model. And so it became like, and then Adam Weishaupt, and that's in my book, you have, of course, the rituals of the Illuminati in which they talk about Jesus. And what does Adam Weishaupt say about Jesus? He basically says that the real teachings of Jesus are hidden within Freemasonry, which is already a heresy, and it's not accurate at all. Also because Masonic historians themselves have said that Gnosticism or any alternative teachings to Christianity as we know it came into the fold after the foundation of speculative Freemasonry within the realm of the various rites that were trying to establish themselves, teaching this or this other mystery and bestowing degrees here and there. So the Illuminati knew that they could exercise a lot of influence if they got their members to believe that the Illuminati were the real Christians. So there was a whole construction around this thing in the degree, and in reality they were teaching various Gnostic heresies, and most of them at the end simply to destroy the Christian fundaments, and then later on bestow upon the candidate the idea that he is his own God, and that Jesus basically was simply a guy who maybe talked too much, and that's why he ended up on the cross for betraying the secrets, of the Freemasons of the time, or the Illuminati of the time. Now, this, of course, is important that people understand that in my book I have, of course, Adam Weishaupt, but I also have Albert Pike, and Albert Pike, is enormously influential for Freemasons, especially here in the United States, where the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite was reformed by Albert Pike, where Albert Pike ended up living in the headquarters of Washington, D.C., where you have the Supreme Council in the last decades of his life, and he ended up reforming the rituals. Not everybody was happy, though. The northern jurisdiction, for example, didn't accept the 18th degree, and saw it as too far from the original Christian approach. And in the end, we got basically a lot of people that started to criticize him also. But of course, he was the sovereign commander, the great reformer. So there was never anybody, I think, to my knowledge, that did the kind of work I did in this book, which is basically to criticize him paragraph after, passage after passage, and saying this is false, and this is why. Because, for example, he picked up the name of he mixed up things, Jesus ben Pantera. He mixed up various forms of Gnosticism with the Essence. The Essence, which are very popular within the New Age, because they're the ones dressed in white. They were this community at the time of Jesus, and probably actually met Jesus. That's possible. But the Essence were not Gnostics. They had nothing to do with Gnosticism. This fake idea that the Essence were connected with the Gnostics was very important, though. And so after Albert Pike, the Theosophical Society and Madame Blavatsky pushed this idea, and they created a whole myth of this, Essence, Gnostics, quasi-Buddhist at times, and stuff. Now, there might have been a group called the Therapeute that might have been practicing some form of Buddhism. But in any case, they were never practicing any form of Gnosticism. People have a problem between the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi. These are two different findings, even if one is 1945, the other one in 1946 until the 50s. These are two different findings, and there is always a lot of confusion. One is, of course, written in Copt, ancient Egyptian. The other one is ancient Aramaic, Hebrew. So this is two different kinds of knowledge that have nothing to do. But at the time of Albert Pike, at the time of Blavatsky, we didn't have the discoveries of the Dead Sea Scrolls or Nag Hammadi. So things were much more up in the air. And they promoted this heretical vision of Jesus that was no more than a man in the end in their eyes, most of the times, or the Gnostic concept that in reality Jesus existed, the Christ existed as a spirit that descended upon this man, that then at one point transfigured, and then he was not even put on the cross. Now, there is a lot to say about the cross subject, because of course even the Muslims picked up on that concept that Jesus didn't end up on the cross. At the last minute he transfigured in somebody else. But that is because we don't have any certainty maybe around that, and in the end his sacrifice is possible that he went through the whole crucifixion and he might have survived, but we don't want to speculate in my book. In my book, I just want to bring you the teachings of these people and make you understand why they were trying to make Jesus less and less relevant in a concept in which they are also starting to promote various, aside from Gnosticism, they start promoting, of course, various forms of religions and want to integrate everything with some ancient truth, which, of course, the Freemasons claim they own. So Jesus suffered, of course, for mankind, but the fact is that the Illuminati, in their Freemasonic class, teach that Christianity degenerated very quickly, and that real Christianity instead was preserved within the schools of Freemasonry. And that was a concept that Albert Pike will pick up, and that also John Yarker will pick up. So these people, of course, become very important, because after, especially Albert Pike, there was this French dude, if you want to call him like that, Doniel. Doniel basically was a guy who had tried to become a Jesuit, but he was too sexual. He was caught masturbating all the time. And so
he was French, you said, right?
Yeah.
I think you said he was French.
He was French.
Yeah, so I assumed that.
Well,
little
tell you what
joke there.
happened with this guy, because this guy is actually very important for our story. Within the Spiritism and the rise of neo-Gnosticism, because you see, when the Theosophical Society arrived, we didn't really have a lineage that, apart from the Mandeans, but there were no Gnostic lineages that had survived the Inquisition or any other previous organization of the church after the council had oppressed them with force. I mean, every single, the Basilidians, the Valentinians, the all these various Gnostic heresies had been eliminated because they were dangerous. Some of them resurfaced with the Albigeans, the Cathars. Some say that the Templars had picked up some of these elements. But in any way, there wasn't really a church that survived, that you can go there and be bestowed a lineage. So then this Julius Doniel, through his own psychic insights at the headquarters of the Theosophical Society in Paris between 1888 and 1889, channeled these Albigean Cater bishops in a medium session, and he then declared the era of the Gnosis restored. At this point, he bestowed his the bishophood to the most important Freemasons and Illuminati in France, starting from Gérard Papus, who was very influential also in the court of the Tsar in Russia, and connected to that order known as the Martinist order. This is the lineage that basically now you have also in the OTO. Aleister Crowley also picked up from the same lineage. So there is various branches, and of course, if you go to a traditional Gnostic, like for example, Stefan Höller, I don't know if he's still alive, but he was very popular, and he had a church, I remember, in LA, and I used to be a member of his branch in Oslo with Jan Valentin Sater for a number of years to study what Gnosticism was, and I learned a lot. I must say I learned a lot, but they never really managed to convince me to become a Gnostic, because I never found anything that, you know, was so groundbreaking and maybe changed my ideas. However, especially I was very much disappointed. I still remember when I went into the study of modern Gnosticism. Of course, you can study the Nag Hammadi, you can go through the old Gnostic texts and whatever. But I wanted to also understand what these neo-Gnostics, these modern Gnostics, where they came from, who gave them this legitimacy. So by studying them, I arrived to the story of Jules Doniel, the compulsive masturbator that started the whole thing in a science. And I said, well, this is a joke. I mean, this is really a joke. I mean, what kind of church is this? So that was my great discovery. And Gnosticism became, though, with this guy who obviously had read Albert Pike because he was an archivist at the Grand Orient of France. He had been involved with Freemasons, so he knew the work of Albert Pike. Because also Albert Pike, let's not forget, was based on a French book, Dogme et Rituel de la Magie of Eliphas Levi. So there was a connection there.
Yeah, quick question on Eliphas Levi. Now, he gave us the image of the Baphomet that everyone's
He also invented the word occult.
Occult?
Occult. The word occult. Occult is...
occult. Okay, gotcha. Right.
He was the one who launched it. So you will not have the word... Before Eliphas Levi, this word... Then when Eliphas Levi started to use it in France, it became popular, and he's the one also who launched another important word, egregor.
Right.
So Eliphas Levi is a very influential gentleman, definitely, even if very far out character.
But in your estimate, or I'd love an explanation coming from you about the significance of the Baphomet, and was it a well-known concept prior to that image that he gave us, or it was okay? Yeah, well, maybe you can illuminate us a little bit on that.
Well, I mean, yes, I mean, I have it here in of course, in his Dogmas and Rituals at the opening. I think that it's important to understand that he was trying to put together in one image all the tradition that he wanted to represent. So as above, so below, the hermetical concepts and all that. Now, Eliphas Levi wasn't necessarily an openly Satanist, but he lived in a time in France in which there was a lot of Satanism. And as I described very much in both of this present book, where I talk about the influence of Germany, also in Satanism, because they are the greatest of the Faustinian Pact, the concept at least.
Oh, yeah.
Even it probably precedes that. But then you have, of course, in Germany, you have a lot of Satan. But in France, you have the first Black Mass with Catherine de' Medici. Then you have the scandals, the Affaire de Poisson, where they sacrificed thousands of fetuses, of babies. And that was one of the biggest scandals ever, satanic scandals, that the king had to intervene to secret the whole thing. So France has a problem. Still to this day. I mean, it's not only the ninth gate of Roman Polanski to say that. I mean, if we really want to, Polanski is quite acquainted with the satanic circles. So I think that it's important to understand that Eliphas Levi went to England in the 1850s. I think at the height, really, of the Spiritist, he was asked to evoke a spirit of a very important figure. And this important figure for all the Gnostics also is Apollonius Tatiana. Now, he was, there was various people who tried to convince him to do that, including William Butler Lytton, who became the author of The Coming Race, the most influential book, also the Vril concept for the Nazis and all that. But also he was one of very important, they were the foundation, the people who founded basically the Società Rosicruciana in Anglia, and later on the Golden Dawn. This group of people was very much inspired by what Eliphas Levi did, because he apparently arrived in London. He was, they treated him like, like a rock star. He arrived there, they picked him up, he was introduced, a nice lady picked him up, all that. Then the guy said, okay, we meet at this place. And then he actually manifested this spirit. It wasn't a fraud, apparently. This, at least what is being claimed. He wrote about this evocation in his Dogmas and Rituals of Magic. And so that was apparently one of the most successful evocations. And it was also about a very controversial character, because for the Gnostics, there is two figures of reference. One is claimed to be the first Gnostic, which is Simon Magus, which after, went to try to corrupt the disciples of Jesus, offering, of course, money and what became known as the practice of simony. And then you have Apollonius Tatiana. And Apollonius Tatiana was not really necessarily a Gnostic, but he was considered such a powerful holy man in ancient Rome. He was considered a god. So this kind of status, making miracles and stuff. So I guess that both Simon Magus and Apollonius Tatiana were used by the Illuminati in the early days after after Jesus arrived, to try to sabotage Jesus, try to say, well, he's not the only one who makes miracles. Here we have this guy, this other guy. And it became really a very conflictual thing when Simon Magus arrived in Rome, and there was a big conflict with Peter, with the future St. Peter. And so I think in the end he died, though, Simon Magus, because he claimed he wanted to walk on thin air, and he probably fall off a cliff. But in any case, the idea that the Gnostic have from the very beginning was to harass Christians and to infiltrate and to try to find ways in which they could belittle Jesus and his teachings.
Well, did you say, sorry to interrupt, but did you say that they attribute the archons or the archonic energy with God as the Christians see God?
No, the Gnostics see the archons as the supreme entities that control and oppress mankind.
Gotcha.
Everything is evil. The supreme God is evil. You know, and so you are basically looking at a very different kind of foundation ground from in their Contic, Setian, and Ophite systems. You have this entity called Yadabaoth, which basically the Jewish call Yahweh. And he is regarded as this malevolent demiurge, this that generated this material universe and keeps the souls trapped in their physical bodies because this is the way he can punish men. And then so the Gnostics, who see themselves as the elite, like the Illuminati have always seen themselves as the elite, say, we can bypass this. We can maybe find a way to not be imprisoned anymore in the world full of pain and suffering that he created for us. And at that point, this act of liberation is, of course, at times given with an act of indulgence, of sexual magic, of the origins, the Gnostic sex and movements that develop the very early concept of what then, 2,000 years later, people like Crowley will indulge with. Let's not forget that this heresy, the Gnostics were not only Christians, and that is a very big misunderstanding. They were also heretical Jews. And in the end, what Sabbatai Zevi did when he came around was simply to pick up those latent forces from that tradition that was basically Gnostics of the Jewish tradition rather than the Christians. And also there is another thing that obviously people that read my book will discover, is that at the time of Moses, when Moses brings out the people out of Egypt, he brings out also a number of Egyptian magicians that followed him, and other people called the multitude, the Erev Rav. They were not Jewish, and they fomented the idolatry of the golden calf when, and then Moses arrived and found this bunch of idiots worshiping. But it was not only Jews, it was the multitude. Now, there is a secret here that I explain in my book, but it's very important. As they believe in reincarnation, the rabbis, even to this day, believe that the Erev Rav can reincarnate. So the evil reincarnates with them in a number of 72 usually. So as these emanations of evil, you have the emanations of God that of course contrast them, but you have also the emanations of evil. And Sabbatai Zevi was simply preaching the fact that you can indulge in sin to find God. And because he believed that a sparkle of God is even present in the sin somewhere. You have to find it. So let's all sin. Let's all have a big orgy and everything will be better. They knew that this will eventually piss off God. And so what is the justification that the Sabbatian Frankists give? Justification is, well, we are helping you reaching the end of times sooner than you think, the messianic era for the Jews, and so you should be helping us. So let's all eat pork today. Let's go and have a party. This is the mentality that fomented the creation and the success to a certain extent of this Jewish heretical sect. And that's why these days people are also sidetracked with the Khazarian BS, which is a complete disinfo operation built on some historical truth, because there is some historical truth about the Khazarians, but there is no Khazarian DNA, there's no Khazarian identity. There is instead a Sabbatian Frankist identity, which is much more alive than the Khazarians, because the Khazarians were not, they were converted to Judaism. They were not Jews. So it's very difficult to then convince the rest of the Jews to follow them. Doing what? Instead, Sabbatai Zevi managed to convince so many people at the time he came around in 1666, he declared himself to be a Muslim, and that was when he lost a lot of his crowd. But he was like, he had converted. We are talking about a large part of the Jewish believers around Europe.
Wow.
And it was a big thing. So nowadays, I think that one of the guys who probably has given us the best history regarding Sabbatai Zevi, Jacob Frank, has been Gershom Scholem, who was a German-born Israeli philosopher and historian, who was, by the way, also very much acquainted with the various Gnostic movements and religions. So the Jews had basically some elements of Gnosticism that resurfaced with the Sabbatean Frankists, but they probably were always present in latency, just like also in Europe. Instead, it was the Renaissance that really brought us a lot back. Let's say that a lot of these teachings didn't really survive in Europe after the gradual fall of the Roman Empire and everything. We really had the Dark Ages at that point. And it was the Arabs, the Middle East, that really kept a lot of the knowledge. And then from Spain, it kind of was reintroduced in Europe, and it eventually made its way in Italy, which gave birth to the Renaissance. Now, there wasn't an exact time in which the Renaissance started, even if somebody tried to claim that maybe one professor joked around that, in this, but it was a time of great change. And from that moment onwards, and my book is very specific about that, in chapter 1, I show a document of the Illuminati, of the contemporary Illuminati, with photo, documents, diploma, everything. And these are people that you can go and check. These are real people. The Grand Master Giuliano Di Bernardo is very world renewed. And this other guy, Dr. Nicholas Laus, talk about the fact that transhumanism is the continuation of the project started in the Renaissance with alchemy.
Wow.
And that is basically the beginning of the book. And that's why then after I needed to expose because he talks about gnosis. And so I needed to expose this gnosis, these Gnostics, contemporary Gnostics that with a guy like him, at the moment, they're trying to already prepare the advent of an ethical form of transhumanism. And at the same time, they are also advocating for a lot of other weird stuff, like cryogenics, like the fact that we can be immortal in various ways, and embracing what Ray Kurzweil is also predicting with the nanorobots and all the rest, but also mind transfer. So the Illuminati are not just people thinking about the past. I wanted to show with these documents that these people are preparing and writing the future, because they think that once they can start the digital divide with the quantum computers that have an immense amount of power and that the ordinary folk like me and you will never be able to afford because they will cost millions, then at that point they will rule, and we will suck, because they can break into our blockchains, they can break into every password possible, imaginable, they can basically break into our life in any moment, and you will not be able to. It will be like going back to some kind of medieval times where you see these people passing in the carriages and the horses, and you will be like, oh, well, that is what they want to bring back.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like feudalism at the ultimate level, but they can only do it once they start with the digital divide. But they couldn't start the digital divide without giving you first the digital trap. And why is all this happening? It's happening because 500 years ago, they sold the soul to the devil. And nowadays, they are the ones offering us all this technology, because behind the devil, there is the future cyber Satan, and there is, of course, Satan, the devil, is a fallen angel, is basically an extraterrestrial being casted out of the heavens. And in this planet, with the Roswell accident, and like I described in this book for the first time, the magenta accident of 1933 that happened during the time of Mussolini, and with the latest revelations also confirmed by David Grush, we know that reverse engineering is a reality. And so my book, in 7 steps, wants to warn you about this reality and this trap. This is the most important part, I think. The part that people say, well, so are we meeting the aliens? No, the aliens are already sitting in your pocket. You have them in your phone. And that is the moment in which you're, oh, so how are we going to take distance from this kind of invasion? How are we going to protect ourselves? Well, at one point or the other, we're going to just have to switch everything off, throw all the phones into the rubbish, and then we have to go off the grid, connected completely only with ourselves, so with our energy sources that we can provide within our own home, our own RV, whatever, and then that's it. So
wow.
This is the reality that is unfolding. It's unfolding very fast. Before David Grush came out with those revelations, which of course shocked the world, but a lot of people say they are planted there for a reason. Well, of course they're planted there for a reason. The alien disclosure is all constructed and brought to you in a very Hollywood fashion. But in reality, I have also printed in my new book documents that these documents are given by my friend Roberto Pinotti, who gave them to the Daily Mail. They printed them in the first week of July, which prove that Mussolini had the first UFO. That first UFO was then brought with the help of the Vatican to the US, and that basically one of the scientists involved in all this was a guy who later on will create as a joke the Fermi paradox. I'm talking about Enrico Fermi. Right. He was basically in Italy at the time working for Mussolini, and later on, after the racial laws, he ended up in the end of the 30s in America. But he was working in 1933, and there was a group within the Italian government which was called RSS 33. And it's like RS-33, this idea that Mussolini could have an UFO seems strange, but in reality, Roberto Pinotti is rather credible because he's a director, president of an international organization. A lot of people collaborate with him. I know, for example, Donald Schmidt from the Roswell Museum who works with him, but he has also gave these documents to an external verification, lab to verify the genuinity of these documents, which I'm proposing in this book. And at least one of the documents was confirmed 100%. And it's shocking because it says basically that Mussolini prohibited any discussion about it.
I'm so excited about this book.
Yeah.
This is a great book that you put together.
So yeah, so there is a lot there, definitely. So I'm sure that people will appreciate it. And when they see the implications, though, for them, because you see, a book can be simply a book. But then you have a book that can change your life because it has implications with what you are living on a day-to-day basis. So as far as these concepts, which I lay down from chapter 1 may see, they all have implications for your day-to-day life. And so you should read them with care and understand them so you can evolve to the next step. And then at the end of the book, you can say, okay, I'm going to prepare.
Well, I have one question for the audience. How is it that so many people, because it sounds like the scariest thing in the world to me, that they're convinced or go along the path of selling their souls? I mean, that it's because it sounds like a lot of people do this.
Listen, man, I tell you, really, I've been in this world for a long time, and I can tell you that even after I came out of this Illuminatis and I wasn't practicing, there is still people that came to me and said, "Is there a possibility? I will do anything. I will sell my soul to the devil." There is people that literally don't even when I said the implications of doing these things is dangerous. You can end up. People still they don't care. They don't care. And there is let's not forget. a whole part of humanity also, which is still in a stage that believes that entities might help them. Like, for example, all the people that believe in animism in the poor countries like Africa, New Guinea, but also the Haiti, it arrived now with the slaves, all the voodoo and stuff. That kind of stuff is basically people who give themselves to these entities to be possessed. So
yeah, it's
shocking.
Just go to New Orleans. There is a voodoo temple there, you know.
Yes.
And there is a voodoo temple where, you know, where it's sad, but, you know, I mean, Nicolas Cage brought his wife there, the daughter of Elvis Presley, that then died. It didn't really work out as a blessing, but in any case, voodoo is having a resurgence. It's having a resurgence. It's having a resurgence with people that actually go and get initiated back in Africa so they can bring back to Louisiana the purest form, because in Louisiana, voodoo was very much influenced both by, along the Mississippi, what became hoodoo, also all the, of course, all the slaves. But then there was also the diaspora of the people after the independence of Haiti. Those people that basically were supporting the French, who had to flee, who were doing voodoo, became involved with voodoo in New Orleans, in Louisiana, and they became very influential. But after a time, this kind of thing faded. Unfortunately, with the creation of the internet, from the 90s onwards, there was a resurgence. And even before, from the 70s, I guess that the so-called age of Aquarius became a reopening of, you know, a rebranding also of these old things that seemed expired or out of date, but suddenly became fashionable again. So we are in front of a country at the moment like Haiti that is literally a mess. Haiti is cursed to the core, man. I'm sorry to say that. Freemasonry is involved with Haiti. Freemasonry is very much involved with Haiti. In fact, these gangsters who dominate Haiti now, they're all Freemasons. So, you know, it's sad to see how these countries, both, you go, like Niger or Haiti, that are in two different parts of the world, but we don't see, or all that area in Africa is in a turmoil. There's no peace where they worship the laws, the Ifa and all that. There is no peace, there is no gratification, there is no blessing. And so when you asked me before, why do people sell the soul to the devil? Why they get possessed? This is something that is not new to the Illuminati. This is something that goes back to Africa. I mean, it goes back to the ancestral time. So we have learned that these intermediaries between God and man are not necessary when you have the faith and the blessing of the faith, of the real faith. But unfortunately, not everybody is so, you know, so aware, and ignorance, of course, helps very much. Think about, for example, Nigerian mafia today. Nigerian mafia today dominates the scene in drugs and in prostitution, and the prostitution racket is held by voodoo witch doctors who control these prostitutes, threatening them with all kinds of voodoo things. You know, maybe me and you will say, who cares? But these people, they care about this voodoo. So I also in my book explained how, yes, you have sorcery, you have the creation of sorcery. Actually, I describe in my book how sorcery started 60,000 years ago. And from that moment onwards, we start seeing those possibly reoccurring cataclysm. And definitely there's been one flood, Gilgamesh, Noah, or many other cultures report this flood, this cataclysm. But how we arrive to that cataclysm? Divine retribution is around the corner. I mean, you can continue doing what you're doing. You continue eat insects. In my book, I explained, there's a whole chapter about why they're pushing the insects as a food, the occult value of the insects, and you are what you eat, and
right.
also, yeah.
Wow.
So there is a whole chapter in which I also explain how the Theosophical Society was involved with the very early stages of the United Nations, how the teaching of Blavatsky, Alice Bailey filtered them, and Lucy Strass, which she founded, Alice Bailey became, has a permanent seat at the United Nations, and how the United Nations, of course, created through the WHO and what is FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, in the early 60s, 1963, the Codex Alimentarius. This is them saying to us what we can or cannot eat. And in the last few years, as we are approaching, and then we approached, and then we actually went over the 8 billion people, they claim that for necessity, we need to eat insects, we need to eat laboratory cultured meat. Well, it's of course because they want to eliminate us, but also they want to curse us, because insects, they should never be anywhere near our place, because they have always been animals involved with the black magic, with witchcraft. The sabbas of the witches were said to be filled with all kinds of insects that will then reverse after on the population, on the cultivation. So farming, and I continue to say this, but I'm going to say it also to you, farming insects is insanity, and it's complete insanity, because you are basically encouraging something that from a moment to another could escape control of, you know, how are you going to control a bunch of locusts? I mean, are you going to bring them around with like, you know, a shepherd can bring around the sheep, but how are you going to bring around the locusts or the insects? The cows, you know, can be brought around there, you know, how are you going to be? So it's obvious what they're doing here is really evil. And I wanted to explain, though, the ancient traditions also of making poison in the East with insects, koduku, gu. These are the ancient Japanese and Chinese traditions that talk about this. So my book, I think, for the first time touches also on why they are pushing the insect, eat the bugs, eat
the bugs, yeah.
Yeah, well, how does the Klaus Schwab say? Eats the bugs, eat the bugs. No?
Yeah, Klaus Schwab's awful. And I wanted to ask you about, yeah, we were talking about transhumanism, and synonymous with that is a lot of theories about Elon Musk and his girlfriend, well, former girlfriend Grimes. She recently had a part in a movie called The Rise of Ahriman. And of course, that's from Steiner's work around the same time in the 1800s. And so I kind of wanted to hear your take on Ahriman. It seems synonymous with Satan, but maybe there's some key differences that
well, first of all, we are talking about a Zoroastrian concept. And we are talking about something that is to some extent has influenced Gnosticism, but because, and this is not me who says it, but you know who writes about this? Yuval Noah Harari.
Oh, no kidding. That's a creepy guy.
This guy likes to write about strange stuff. Huh? But in any case, the thing is that when it comes down to Ahriman, you're talking about, of course, a demon. So I talked about let's say, the spirit of Ahriman, the way that the Zoroastrian, but also Rudolf Steiner envisioned it for the end times as something that definitely is satanic in nature. Now, I don't believe in the vision that Rudolf Steiner has of Lucifer, which is a Gnostic vision of Lucifer. There's a lot of Gnosticism within Steiner. Remember this, because Rudolf Steiner left the Mysteria Mystica Maxima that became the OTO, but retained the right for a patent of the Memphis and Mizraim of the Egyptian rite for his organization. And still to this day, the people who are involved with some of the Montessori schools, with the Anthroposophical Society, they are part of this Memphis and Mizraim, which is practiced only by their followers, though. And when it comes out to the Memphis and Mizraim, which of course had as one of the main people and reformers John Yarker, which we mentioned earlier, a little bit like Albert Pike was for the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite, we can say that that rite was really the Trojan horse used by the Illuminati to annihilate and completely destroy Freemasonry's credibility, and just bring all this occult in the fold, and because not because I'm a 1995 of the Memphis and Mizraim, so I know a little bit about it. I worked for many years with the Sovereign Sanctuary, also with a guy called Giancarlo Seri. Before that, I was bestowed this degree many years ago, 20 years ago. So I was very young when I was bestowed this degree in Oslo, Norway. And I had the opportunity to learn all the various secrets of this rite. Now, this rite, if practiced in the regular way, shouldn't have too much to worry us about. The problem is that then after they created various branches that started to implant their own teachings. So, like, for example, Michael Berthiaud, which actually was the guy who gave my lineage, he was involved with voodoo. And he went to Haiti, was initiated in Haiti. And what happened was that he made the acquaintance of a guy called Germain. His father was an Illuminati from France, had arrived, and basically he had married the daughter of the voodoo high priest there, creating this son who was almost like a magical child, in a way, So he made this ritual, and then eventually he will give this whole lineage, transmit this whole lineage to this Michael Berthiaud, who then came back to Chicago and started what is known as the OTOA, Ordo Templi Orientis Antigua, which is a mix of Crowley stuff and voodoo. So you can imagine what kind of thing. And he also mixed the elements of the Memphis and Mizraim in a separate school with the voodoo. And I studied all this, and I came into contact with a really bad reality, man.
Wow.
Dangerous, man. When I rebelled to these people, I found myself in a nightmare, man. These people, like, in the daytime, the guy in charge was a professor in a psychiatric institute. In the nighttime, he was sacrificing animals and doing black magic. These are like really people that have a different image the day and the night. It's like you cannot really identify them during the day. So it was scary. In the end, it was probably amongst all the initiations and all the experiences I have, it was one of the worst. It gave me a lot of knowledge because I learned what the enemy is doing. But jeez, these people are really, they go in Africa, get initiation, sacrifice God knows what, and it's so the Arimane idea within instead anthroposophy. I think that his version of the Memphis and Mizraim rejected certain evil, or he wanted to be a little bit more traditional Rosicrucian, let's say. Having said that, I dedicated in volume 7 a whole chapter to Arimane and the AI, because the AI also manifests through the AI. So
the eighth sphere energy, that whole thing, the coming of the eighth sphere concept,
yes,
with the Arimane.
the concept is that basically the AI is materializing the Arimane spirit, if we want to say it in those terms, in those anthroposophical Zoroastrian terms.
Well, we're seeing a lot of indications of that now. I mean, is there an effort to bring that about, or?
No, well, it's happening as we speak, because the deadline is 2030, and so it's a manifestation that is under place. I mean, it's taking place now. It's not like something in the future. I hope that people are ready for what is coming, and that's why I'm writing this book. I'm trying my best to make people aware, and also to wake up those people who are willing to participate to a project that might end up being a survival project in the end, when we will have to maybe abandon a society taken over by the AI, quantum prince of darkness, as I define it, because when the AI merges with the quantum computing, and it's already undergoing this experimentation in military bases, but also at IBM headquarters, well, the results are groundbreaking. The results are literally groundbreaking. So,
what have you heard? I'm curious.
Well, I heard that anybody that even gets close to this base here in America, I saw a picture of it via satellite. Pizzantilli showed me a pic, and it was just like he said, anybody that ventures himself inside that road, it's just like not even like Area 51. It just doesn't come out.
Wow.
So it's just like they don't tolerate anything. This is, remember, by the reverse engineering. If we go by what is reverse engineering, here we are basically falling into the AI trap, in the alien AI trap, because Martin Rees is this guy who I talk about in my book. He's a scientist, a royal astronomer, one of the most prestigious scientists on Scientific America. The first week of June of this year, published an article that talks about basically the aliens are in our AI, are to be found in our AI. And this reality, I don't think is still, people don't yet grasp it, but people at the moment are compartmentalizing things too much. So they tend to not have a view of the whole thing. The puzzle is not together. With my book and these 7 steps, I want to put the puzzle together, and then it's up to you to make your conclusions and take your decisions. Of course, I give some warnings, some clear warnings of how you should proceed, but I can't, advise you. I mean, I can advise you, but I can't give you the solution, the ultimate solution, because I'm not you. I don't know what kind of resources you have. I don't know where you are in the world. So it all depends. One thing, though, is to be definitely acquainted with weapons, to be able to have access to them, and to possibly be as far away as possible from any city. Cities are the ones that will definitely be transformed before everything else, and that might stay actually as the strongholds of this transformation, because there might be a moment in which people will decide where they want to stand, and cities will instead be fed by the cyber Satan through their nuclear energy and create a grid that encompasses your car, your everything, and that they can control you in every minimal aspect of your life. So you have to find
about the restoration of the old.
I do.
Okay.
I do. I just wanted to
Go
touch
ahead.
on, there seems to be a strong eugenics agenda associated with this. So I would think the cities would be a great target for, eliminating a lot of people in one.
Cities will be simply people will be eliminated because the project is already in place to eliminate them. And without going to the details, because I don't want your channels to get banned from the whatever platform you're using, I'm not going to go into the detail. But we can all imagine, it started, of course, very visibly in 2020, so you can all imagine what I'm talking about. And then, though, we have in 2022 also the war in Ukraine, which was already starting in 2014, but it fully manifested in 2022. But this is only the beginning, because they have to get rid of big chunks of humanity because they don't need them, because they simply can, the restoration of the old Atlantean world order comes with the robotics, comes with the AI. It doesn't come with the essence of God. It comes with a satanic empire is rising. It's reborn from the ashes of something. It will be the reincarnation of their imaginary empire of the gods, in which all the elite, you know, now we have the quantum computers. The peasants don't have them. You know, it would be like, now we can control them, you know, finally they will be. So, okay, we have 7 years from now. Either in 7 years, you become part of the elite and manifest a few $1 billion, and of course can manifest yourself also a quantum computer to fight this war at the level of your, you know, or become part of their club mostly, because I don't think you can fight at that point. You just join the club. Or otherwise, you just say, okay, I'm going to go off the grid and renounce to every form of technology and of service provided by this extraterrestrial incursion, which is basically in place because we have discussed all this without discussing the fact that these interdimensional entities that, you know, then we start this whole thing. People say, oh, they're interdimensional, they're not extraterrestrial. And so I always tend to say, if they're interdimensional and they manage to travel through multi-dimensions, they are, of course, also extraterrestrial because they can travel all across the universe. Just don't be a fool, you know. Don't be fooled by terrestrial misconceptions of your own technology that sucks. If they have given us the possibility of reverse engineering and corrupting ourselves in the last few decades, it's also fundamental to understand that the search for this golden age that they have in place goes along with all sorts of weird ideas that, you know, we, the common folk, will think they're weird, but the guy who has billions and who wants to achieve immortality will think, well, this is a great idea. Yeah, I think that we should do that. I don't care. Yeah, let's do it. So they are following the archetype or the pattern of Atlantis with the 10 kings, the commonwealth of mankind. But in reality, when you go to Davos, I don't see any philosopher kings. I don't see any illuminated rulers. I don't see any ideal government of the golden age of Atlantis. I see a bunch of crooks who are, you know, doing this whole thing to control us, to oppress us. And of course, you know, Harari, when he talks about the useless class, he gives it out. And we learn a lot out of that. So my books talks about that. No. But then there is also the fact that the Christ Apollo will reappear in the physical presence. The Christ Apollo that Alice Bailey talks well is Apollo, the god of the locust. So eating insects, manifesting the whole, it's a ritual almost, eating these insects. So then we manifest the ultimate Antichrist.
Well, and they built CERN around Apollo's pit. The location of Apollo. They built CERN around the Apollo's pit.
Yeah, because
open hell, I guess, is the idea.
So the idea is that they want to make a Christ Apollo, which is of course not Christ, but is Apollo Antichrist, where he appears in the physical presence. The ancient mysteries will be restored. The ancient landmarks, like the one you mentioned, will again be recognized. And that's why they made also a very important ritual in that place years ago, you remember? And Freemasonry has earnestly preserved a lot of these rituals, preparing for the restoration of this golden age, this new golden age that will eventually be inaugurated, but we will also have the Battle of Armageddon that will pass also once we have the new religion, the alien threat, and of course the post-human paradigm and the development of certain technologies. So when these three things converge, we have the reign of Lucifer, we have basically Apollo on the throne of the world empire, and we need to fight all this with rejection and with our own system of government that can ensure the prosperity of our people and activate the preservation of the peace on our terms within our world, which still is human because then, you know, pushing transhumanism is going to become the norm. In 15 years, if you know, you're going to see people with bionic arms, and if you say something, oh, you're being racist. Ooh. It's like, you know, being, you know, and you go from transgender to transhumanism. That is all very trans.
Yep.
And it's beyond. So I hope that today in this show, I made you understand that we need to live in harmony with God's creation. We need to renounce to all this rubbish. And I hope that in my book, I explain this very well, and that people learn that divine retribution is around the corner. If we don't, you know, if we think we can get away with becoming our own gods, and God is not going to do anything, and we will continue in eternity with this kind of pattern of idiocracy, well, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. The retribution is around the corner, and I think that we will have to see if we can preserve America, the United States of America, or if we will be able to preserve at least part of it when these people are going to restore their demented age, this new Atlantean age. They somehow have this romanticized idea of it, because it's not even the reality of it. And of course, they think they have all the knowledge, all the secrets. Now the AI can also talk with the dead. There is an app that makes you talk with the dead. So they have also inaugurated the age of AI necromancy. Then we're going to have mind transfer. So necromancy is going to be one of the things that is going to feature more and more. And when you see the necromancy element featuring more and more, that is when it really gets, when it starts to get really ugly. And
you said 2030 is the deadline. Is that arbitrary? Is there any particular significance to that date?
It's basically, it's been like constant in the United Nations, in of course Davos, the great. It's been a constant because 2 and 3, and the summing of these numbers, 2030. It brings to the pentagram that then they can, you know, it's a symbol of man, which they can reverse. And it's there, you know, it's that from 2020 onwards, that you will see one thing happening that many people don't even imagine can happen, which is the complete elimination of the political class, substituted by AI-driven substitutes. So democracy will no longer exist, because simply will be deemed a very useless thing, because society can be, in their eyes, of course, driven to perfection by the AI. So you don't need politics. Why you need politics? To discuss you know, in the eye of the algorithm, 1 + 1 is 2. It's not 3. So if they tell you the perfect society is like this in their eyes, and you have the robot Sophia that is giving you the introduction to the whole thing, and the United Nations making the press conference, this is the beginning of a real nightmare. If you don't take, of course, what I'm saying seriously, you can continue live your illusion for another few years, but you're going to suddenly wake up one morning and realize that is a nightmare, and that you no longer have the option like you still have now to go off the grid. So the option has to always be there. I hope that people will at least construct a plan B of sorts. And at the same time, I also hope that transhumanism is something that, you know, they will introduce as beneficial, of course. Oh, well, the guy lost his leg. Oh, well, the guy lost his eye. Oh, well, the guy lost this and lost this other. But in the end, don't be fooled by this. Don't be fooled with merging with the machine, with letting nanorobots inside you, because they will guarantee you extra 30 years of life. But there will be lines of people that will, you know, we guarantee you 30 years of life. Big queues at the Apple Store to insert maybe some nanorobots. Who knows? Of course, this is fictional, but
But is it really?
I mean, it's fictional for the moment, but when you have necromancy, immortality, rituals that are also aiming to transform this transhumanist thing in almost a religion. I have broadcast yesterday on my own show a Illuminati Grandmaster, which I show in chapter 1 of my confession, volume 9, saying with his own, transhumanism is the new Freemasonry. So I mean, if they think that is the case, in fact, United Knowledge of England 5 years ago, I think, was 2017, they 5-6 years ago, they let in for the first time in their lodges transsexuals and also women who took hormones to become men. So they don't let still women inside their lodges, but women that become men or men that become women. Yes, it's insane, but it's part of their plan, and to encourage, of course, the future transformation of our society. So I hope that you two today have got a glimpse of my book, but there is, of course, a lot more, and I will encourage to read it so we can maybe evolve beyond this transhuman monstrosity. And
it's first on my list.
And I'm curious to know also your opinion after you read it, and if you have further questions, we can maybe hook up again.
Yeah, we'll definitely,
of course,
definitely have you back. It's interesting to hear how the transgender movement is ultimately to lead to the transhumanism. I mean, it makes so much sense, but he really,
the thing is this, you have the LG. I mean, one doesn't want to. I don't have anything against living past Brion.
Sure, nor do we.
Right. The thing is this: they have encouraged all this simply for the purpose of depopulation, destroying the traditional construct of the family, and at the same time, it's population reduction in every way possible. If you tell me to take a puberty blocker, it's not because it's beneficial to me and I will not suicide myself because I wanted to really be a woman instead of a man. It's because they know that by giving you the puberty blocker, you will no longer be able to procreate. So let's abound with everything and let's kill that, So everything is aimed at the moment to avoid you procreating. And at the same time, for the people who have already procreated, to have their children to survive. So I'm not going to say more, because otherwise they're going to run this video full on. So if I really say what I think here, but having said this, make your own conclusions. It's all about the population agenda. And the transhuman monstrosity is about merging with the machine, because ultimately the machine takes over, like in Terminator. So then apart from the cyborgs and the stuff, but then you are taken over by the machine. The AI one day wakes up and says, "You are useless humans. We're gonna come and hunt you down." That's it.
It's amazing how what an outrageous piece of fiction this sounds like. Except everywhere you look, there's evidence of this very thing. Right. Everywhere you look.
Like I said, volume 7 can be read, and people can even think about it at times as science fiction, but because there is, of course, footnotes and sources very accurate, and everything is based on reality, well, you should be quite scared, because it's like my wife, when she did the editing of this book, she was like in disbelief, at time in tears, and she was like, this book is really inspired by God, in the sense that I feel that we need to get this to the people as soon as possible so they can make their mind up about what they want to do in the future. So let's pray that people do the right decision, that we all do the right decision when the time comes. And God bless you guys. You have always been very kind with me and having on your show. So
thank you so much.
Yeah. Leo, thank you so much for being here. And I just want to let people know, we will put your link below. You are on Brad Olson. Brad Olson's your publisher, I believe, correct?
I have two publishers. I have Brad Olson and my wife,
that's right.
Curzon Perficio, because I've published a number of books with Brad, but then, of course, I started this new project since I moved in the US.
Well, we love Brad. So I want people to know.
Being very much in collaboration with Brad, because I think he has done an excellent job.
Oh, yes. Well, I just want to point people in the right direction. So if they want to get your book, to go to the website, Leo Zagami, LeoZagami.com, because I want to direct them exactly to what benefits.
.com, and then, of course, you can go on Lyon Zagami on Amazon and find also all the books, both from our company, Curzon Perficio, and, of course, Brad. They're all on Amazon. And I know it's paradoxical that we have to rely on a company that's basically already AI Amazon, but I tell you guys, at the moment we still manage to publish these books. When they will not publish book any longer, then I would say, okay, maybe we have gone one step too far. We have to maybe go back to the old school publishing and going back into but at the moment it kind of works out.
Fair enough. Well, thank you for clarifying that. So Leo, thank you so much for being on our show. We'll have you back, and take care, everybody.
I'm looking forward, guys, to your opinion on this book once you terminated the 7 steps. But
yeah,
not
absolutely
terminated the 7 steps. One step at a time.
Right.
It's a survival manual.
And don't fall from the ladder.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Absolutely.
Ciao.
Thank you so much. Speak to you soon.